So welcome back to our second session. We entitled this section, Structuring the University for the Path to Reconciliation. And this session is about university governance and administration and how these structures can help us meet our goals. So, what is that language, structures? So by structures and governance, what we mean, very broadly, is that everything from how we hire people into positions, how we ready the workplace, how we identify new positions for Indigenous faculty and staff, how does the university go about making decisions, and how do universities, including our own, what is our thinking, what is our progress around Indigenous advisory bodies, internal, external, those kinds of things. So that's what is meant by structures and governance. So for this panel, we're going to start with 3 short presentations, 3 different speakers who I will introduce to you in turn. And then we'll have time for questions again as well for those of you who, there's a mic here. So let me start by introducing our first speaker, Leah Hennike, immediately to my left, chair of our Board of Governors and someone with many years of experience in Indigenous leadership. Just a few introductory remarks about Lee. First of all, I'm thrilled that Lee could be here with us today and spend the day with us. Leah Hennike is a member of the Ahenakew First Nation, and he's also CEO of BATC Investments Limited, with broad knowledge, extensive experience working with First Nations and industry across Canada. Lee develops business relationships with a focus in the natural resource and utility sectors. Lee develops new opportunities and partnerships through organizational strategies, community engagement, and quality processes to advance Indigenous inclusion and social responsibility. Lee was appointed to our Board of Governors. He's a government appointment to our Board of Governors in 2013, and he currently serves as the chair of our Board of Governors. So I welcome Lee to the podium to begin our session.
Thank you, Patty, Tanse, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Elder Larry Oakes for raising the pipe for us this morning and having that ceremony to start us off in the right way, and Elder Half for the opening prayer this morning. As Patty mentioned in introducing me, I've been working on corporate Aboriginal relations and relationships, partnerships, business development for a long time. And it's something, actually, when I graduated from the University of Saskatchewan, I kind of fell into that career. I moved to Toronto and volunteered for a place called the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and that's what they did, is got corporations and Indigenous communities together to work on their partnerships and employment. And that was a while ago. I won't date myself, but that organization started in 1985, and that was really when people first started thinking about, as a business, as an organization, we can have strategies to engage and include and partner with Indigenous people and communities. And I know the university has been a leader in this, as we've heard earlier this morning. But I guess to remind ourselves, how I guess relatively recent it is that businesses, I'd say probably in the last 10 years, have just started really to grasp this. Where it's now in the last few years becoming popular, and certainly new territory for post-secondary institutions in terms of looking at not just the programming but the whole organization. And at the board level, I guess what I'll talk about is what the tools we have to ensure that we do this. And there's four basic tools that any board uses to get done what they need to get done on behalf of their stakeholders. One is leadership, policy, the strategic plan, and also your budgets. So I'll touch on those. Most important thing for any of this is leadership. I've been hearing that my whole career. You're not going to make advances by just hiring someone in an Aboriginal portfolio and saying, go to it. It has to start at the top. And we're really fortunate to have that leadership, and President Peter Stoicheff, who said at his announcement speech, I'll steal his words for the moment, if not us as a university leading the way, then who? And if not now, in the wake of the recent TRC recommendations, then when? So you know, if not who, and if not now, when. Obviously, we knew that this was a priority for Peter through that process of hiring a new president. You know, we rest well as a board knowing that we need to do this, you know, for the province, for the university, for Indigenous people. We need to get this right, and we have a great leader to be able to do that. Board representation is another thing that's important. There's various initiatives to get a good representative board in terms of Indigenous inclusion out there. We have one appointment being specifically Aboriginal, that's me, and we've been very fortunate the last few years to have, number one, a Chancellor, Blaine Fable, who was chief of the FSIN at 29. I was fortunate to work with him when he was a leader back then. Did some amazing things then, and is still doing them, the reconciliation event we heard about. So we had a Chancellor, and we had 3 consecutive student union presidents that were, of course, Cree, being Cree myself. But I'm sure we'll get some Dene and other people eventually, you know. So, but that was amazing to have 3, you know, and I sat on the board with all of them. So we've really been lucky that way in terms of our leadership. Strategy is another thing, and really, when it comes down to it, the board's job is to make sure we're moving significantly in the direction of this strategic plan. And the foundation for that is the mission, vision, and values. And now we have, you know, a couple of areas in that document that was just released last year that speak towards that will be an outstanding institution for research, learning, knowledge keeping, reconciliation, and inclusion with and by Indigenous peoples and communities. So that's our vision, to be that inclusive. And as well in that document, we have the value of reconciliation. And values are something that we need to define in that document, and then that'll happen over the course of time. We'll define those for ourselves and what they mean. But every plan that we do now has to drive towards that vision, that value, and has to be inclusive of those. So it's really baked into our the basis of how we start things now is Indigenous inclusion. And we're just starting on the 4th integrated plan, and probably as many of you know, 4 is a very significant number in Indigenous culture. You've got, you know, 4 seasons, you've got the 4 directions, the 4 stages of life. There's a lot of meaning behind that, and you can see that in the Gordon Oaks Red Bear Center. So I don't know if it's, I don't think anything's by coincidence. 4th integrated plan, and we've got the right point to start on that right now. Another thing is policy. How we do things as an organization is important. So we adopted a policy at the board level. I know the University Council has, and I'm sure many other bodies of the university, about starting every meeting recognizing that we're on Treaty 6 territory. One of my ancestors, Chief Ahenakew, signed Treaty 6, and you know, very important. All our gatherings that we have when you're as First Nations people start with recognizing the territory you're on, and when you're traveling other places, you also recognize whose territory you're on. So that was a big thing. It's, you know, it's always top of mind every time you start a forum, and those types of things change the culture, because it's about the culture. You have to create the culture and the place and the way you do things to be inclusive. So that was very important. And of course, you know, the budgetary wise, that's another tool. The budget and making sure that you're investing in where you want to go. So in terms of indigenization and the university being the best place it can be for Aboriginal people, again, great words coined by our president. I've seen buildings get built. The Gordon Oaks Red Bear Center, we approved that while I was on the board, and that was, it's a lot better than the office in Lower Place that we had in the hallway when I was going to school here, let me tell you. It's wonderful to go in there, to be able to have a pipe ceremony there in Smudge this morning. It's just incredible, and to have gatherings there, a very well-used space. And those spaces create the culture too. When you have a place like that for gathering, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of events with a lot of dignitaries from all over, and that'll help help in what we're doing. Also, we've made the commitment to hire a vice provost Indigenous engagement. So really, important in terms of the structure and allocating that budget. So those are the things you do: leadership, strategy, policy, budget. The board's at a pretty high level. All these good things that happen come from recommendations from the president and his team and everyone working at the university. We were fortunate to be able to sit back and ask tough questions and make sure that we're going significantly in that strategic direction that we need to be. And I feel very confident that we are, with all these good things in place. And at the end of the day, we're about doing what we need to do for our stakeholders. As a board, you're really an agent for all the stakeholders of the institution. So that's, really Saskatchewan. If you look at our Senate, it's very representative of all corners of Saskatchewan. And with our stakeholders, I think it's important to them, because if we're successful in closing this education gap, as Dr. Ahenakew recently published a report, that's going to mean $90 billion in GDP to the provincial economy in an average person's lifetime. So it's really important to our economy to get this right. And being, have worked in the industry and in the resource sector in industry, I know that very well. We really need our people and our communities contributing as much as possible. And other ways just that we engage, I served on the committee for mission, vision, values, and I see Wendy here. That's we made sure we engaged with the Aboriginal community on campus and off, with the FSIN, and I know that's been formalized recently, those meetings. So really important that we engage with the community as well and serve our stakeholders. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for being here, for the leadership for being here, the president, vice presidents. I see the deans here, board members. That's important. This is where it starts, and look forward to the journey that we have ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. The next panel member to speak will be Peter. So, Peter, I invite you to the mic.
Thanks, Patty, and thanks, Lee. Lee had mentioned the vision, mission, values document, and I actually wanted to start with that. And he read out the statement that so many people who were involved with the creation of this, literally thousands, ended up contributing to. And it's the one at the bottom of the vision there, which is in 2 paragraphs, that's highlighted. Thanks, Jared, for doing that. Yeah. We will be an outstanding institution of research, learning, knowledge, keeping, reconciliation, and inclusion with and by Indigenous peoples and communities. It's a strong statement, and I'll just mention to you in the context of this panel that there were many reasons for this university reinvigorating and making current and making really visionary its vision, mission, values document. The last one that we had, and it was the one that we did have until very recently, as many of you know, was produced in 1993. And there were many interesting things about that statement that took the university a long way. But there was nothing in there about Aboriginal people and Aboriginal aspirations on behalf of the university. The history that I read of the development of that document involved several events where there was discussion about whether or not to include some kind of language, but ultimately it was not included. And we really felt that it was important. I mean, we as a whole university community, as I say, there were thousands of people who contributed to this. This was not a document that I or other senior administrators drafted and then passed around. We started with a blank page. And this is what resulted. But that phrase was obviously a very important one to many, many people. And the phrase didn't start off quite this way, because it had reconciliation and inclusion with and by and for Indigenous people. And I wanted to point this out because it was many Indigenous leaders on and off campus who said, when they were seeing this toward near its final state, you don't include that word for. Michelle Pratula was mentioning this in a slightly different context. In other words, getting the wording of that right, and I hope it's right, and it was agreed to by our 3 different governing bodies, was a long and arduous and careful process, and particularly with this point of the document. So I don't want to dwell too much on that. I just want to say it's meaningful. And when people look at who we are, what we're about, where we think we're going, what's important to us, what our principles and values are, people who don't know the university or not involved with the university, live around the world away from this university, they can partly encounter it through these words, and so they're important. The other thing I just wanted to say was that watching this document develop and watching that part of this document develop was a really educational activity for me, because all of what we're doing here today, and it speaks to the governance and structures as well, is based on learning from each other. It's based on learning from Aboriginal students, and you heard 3 speak earlier today. It's based on learning from Aboriginal faculty. It's based on learning from Aboriginal leaders. It's based on learning from a lot of people who have a lot of good ideas about what to do and, frankly, what not to do. When to be, as Martin was saying when he was talking about patience, when to be patient, and, frankly, when to be impatient. And the development of this document was just an interesting example of that for me, and I learned a lot. So some of the things that I wanted to mention that align with what the chair of our Board of Governors, thank you very much, Lee, for speaking today and for being chair of our Board of Governors. The things that I wanted to mention align with a lot of the things that Lee was saying, and I'll just talk about them from my perspective, which of course is not drastically different from a board's, but has some other things to add. So I wanted to start with a few examples of the things that have been going on, but I did want to end with the gaps that I see, and that list could go on for a long time, and I hope through the university's future that list will continue for a long time, and gradually those gaps will get filled in and closed. But some of the things that have happened that you all should know, deserve to know, would want to know, and you might know some of these, you might not know all of them, I'm not sure. But the U of S recently signed an agreement. It was in the Gordon Oaks Red Bear Student Center maybe 4 weeks or so ago now, with the FSIN to increase the communication and collaboration between our 2 organizations. And that is a really great agreement. And at the heart of that agreement is a tangible version of what I was just saying a minute ago. It commits the president of this university to meeting at least once a year with the Assembly of Chiefs and listening to what they have to say about what's maybe going well, but what really is needed from the university in order for the university to serve Aboriginal people in the province, at least, better. So it commits to that happening. It also commits to the chief of the FSIN coming to our campus annually and meeting with significant bodies, council, the board, Senate, student groups, to hear about and to talk about what the university is and could be doing. So it's actually a really significant agreement, that MOU that was signed about a month ago. And I have to say that the idea that started with Chief Bobby Cameron back when we were having our forum, our National Forum on Building Reconciliation here. but also when we were talking about signing that MOU I mentioned earlier today with the other 23 post-secondary institutions in the province on closing the education gap that Lee was just describing the effects of. And it was really Chief Cameron who pushed for this MOU. And by that, what I'm really saying is there are large external groups of great significance in the Aboriginal communities in this province who are looking to us and, for the moment, if I could put it that way, trust us to be able to work with them. And the MOU was a signal of that trust, but it was also a signal that there are things that need to be done over time, not just once, to maintain their trust in us. And so I took that very seriously. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Another is the U of S will be hiring in a new position, a new administrative position, and Lee was mentioning this briefly a moment ago. I'll elaborate on it just a little bit. And this was something that we learned in two places. One was at that National Forum on Building Reconciliation. The other was when a group of us, including our former Chancellor Blaine Fable, went on a trip to New Zealand with the exclusive mission of visiting universities and trying to understand some of their best practices that have connected them up with their Indigenous communities in New Zealand. And I think one of the takeaways that we had from that trip was that they are about a generation ahead of us in many ways. So we learned a lot. And one of the things that we learned, and it was said again just in a slightly different way with different examples by some of the universities whose Aboriginal and faculty, student, and administrative leaders joined us for the National Forum a while ago, was that it is crucial to have somebody in an administrative position of significance and influence who will be able to sit around the right tables and ensure that a lot of things that we are talking about here, a lot of questions that the students just answered that we need to have asked, that we need to have answers to, ensure that we find ways as an institution of making good on that. So one position, the position I wanted to talk a little bit about that we have designed is a Vice Provost Indigenous engagement. And it's modeled on, or maybe I should better say inspired by, influenced by, only a couple of other positions like that in the country. And I noticed that the University of Manitoba is now hiring in that position with exactly the same name as we've chosen. But we got our ad out first, so it doesn't matter. But that emerged from the National Forum, that you really do have to, and I was talking earlier today about, putting concrete resources toward these things, and that's just one example of doing it. This position is not a position that will sort of do it all, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the details of it, but maybe keep one thing in mind about it. It's not a position that's designed so that all the things we're talking about here will get done and we don't need to meet like this anymore. It's exactly the opposite. It's a position that will collaboratively try to coordinate across the whole university the kinds of things that we're talking about today, to lead the creation of new structures and processes to implement Indigenous initiatives and to build reconciliation. So that's just another example of what we're trying to do in terms of governance and structure. But there are many others, and I'll go through them a little more quickly. But one is that I was mentioning earlier the influence that Blaine Fable has had on this institution while he was Chancellor. And he'll be speaking at the end of today, and I hope we'll reflect on some of those things at that time as well, so you can hear it from him instead of just from me. But one of the things that he's been doing, was doing while he was Chancellor, and has been helping us with since he stepped down from the Chancellor role, has been to help us design a couple of councils. One, an Elders Advisory Council, primarily for me. It's not unlike what the Chief of Police has in this city, and we've seen this happening in other cities as well. So an elders council, a group of elders that I can develop close relationships with from across the province and close by, who can help me, but also an elders consultation group on appropriate cultural practices. That's a second group. Because as you know, we have many different Aboriginal communities in this province, 4 nations, Dene, Ojibwe, Cree, and Sioux. We are the University of Saskatchewan, and we are on Treaty 6 territory, but we also serve all the regions of this province. And so Blaine's thinking here, and I appreciate it, is an elders consultation group on appropriate cultural practices, given those differences, and frankly, the many missteps that we as an institution, that I publicly could make, many of us could make, without knowing it and without intending it. So that's something else that's being worked on. We're well through the consultation phase of developing those two. We signed an agreement with the National Centre on Truth and Reconciliation about a year ago. That was driven in large part by the library and in concert with Patty McDougall's office. I mentioned that Universities Canada, which is a sort of umbrella organization for all of the 97 universities in this country, has been active in a number of ways. One of them is that it has picked up the responsibility, the authority for continuing on with those national forums on building reconciliation on an annual basis. I mentioned that earlier. I'll just say a little bit more about it. The point of that is so that we don't just sort of hope that from year to year some university is going to pick up the ball there, but instead to structure it so that it has sustainability and longevity, that we foresee it happening for at least a decade, and I would hope that at the end of that decade we might have another one back here again and then start it all over again. But really to continue it, to ensure that there's funding and there's a kind of organizational structure in place to ensure that those happen and that they're really good every year. So Universities Canada is doing that, but that was at the prompting of, as I mentioned before, Blaine and Patty McDougall. I also wanted you to know, though, that that Universities Canada, which is an extremely influential group in Ottawa and across the country, but primarily in Ottawa, it's had a lot of influence on federal budgets. It's got a lot of influence on what universities do collectively and ensuring that politicians and other influential people understand the role and the value of universities. Universities Canada, through its education committee, which I now chair, but I wasn't chairing when it was doing this, came up with a set of principles that you can find on the web, on the Universities Canada site, a series of principles that, again, were highly consultative and were influenced by that national forum that we held here on indigenizing at universities, principles for reconciliation. And we follow those, and we had a hand in developing them. And all universities in this country know about them. Those principles were approved at a meeting in Ottawa, and everybody is well aware of them. In terms of governance positions here, Lee was mentioning we've had 3 USSU Aboriginal presidents, Chancellor Favel, our Board of Governors Chair, Leah Hennike. We've got an Indigenous Students Council. I think all of that is really wonderful, and it's leaders, but it's also the wonderful students we've had. Again, as I've mentioned to you, we've heard from 3 of them already today. It's that community that I think we need to build in whatever ways we can through our governance structures, through being inviting, through listening, through giving forums for students and other leaders to speak, that will drive this and make it successful. So there's much else that I could talk about, but here are some of the things I wanted to end off by saying we need to do. You've heard this in different ways through the first panel, but obviously we need to come to terms in, I think, a quite deliberate way with aspirations regarding the number, the percentage of faculty and staff at the university, and you'll hear a little bit more about that with this panel, I'm sure, and more to come in the future, but it's something that we need to talk about as a university in order to drive and enable change, in order to be role models for students, and primarily to look at this in the STEM disciplines. And that we heard a little bit about that before, but where we see, statistically speaking, underrepresentation. So we need to really work on that, and that will take some deliberate thinking, and I think we have to be aspirational about it, we have to be committed to it. So that's one thing. Another is we enjoy a very strong relationship with our city, with the city council, with the mayor. We have for a long time, as a matter of fact. And and I think many of us are particularly invigorated, let's say, by some of the directions that city council and the mayor are currently saying they want to take this city. We have a very close relationship with the city. We have a close relationship with the province, and we have close relationships with federal ministries, no question. But as I often say, the relationship between a university and its municipality is extraordinarily important. And this is a city where a lot of different things are going on in municipal versions of what we're talking about here. And we need to really build strong relationships between ourselves and the city with regard to building reconciliation. And the city, in fact, is looking to us as one of the dominant institutions, not just in the city, but in the province, one of the main cultural institutions anywhere around here. They're looking to us to help, and we should be looking to them, and I say to everybody in this room, accepting any invitations or looking for any opportunities to work with the city, either in an academic way or through student bodies or through students, senior administration, to collaborate with the city. Another thing that I'd mention is that we need to strengthen our relationships with our elders so they are integrated more fully into our employment ranks. I confess I don't know exactly what that will look like, but that issue was raised at the National Forum a while ago, and it lingered there, and it certainly lingered in my imagination. And all of you have heard already today about the elders. I know Norm Fleury is here, Larry Oakes, Louise Half, and many, many others who work very hard on behalf of what we are trying to achieve at this university, what they want the university to achieve on behalf of students here and so on, to ensure that the ceremonies are carried out appropriately, to set the tone, to say the right words. And there are universities that are starting, Vancouver Island is one of them, to build elders into their structures more meaningfully, and I think that's something that we could pay attention to in the near future. Finally, I'll just point this out. I think one of the things that we can do, and it isn't very dependent on funding, it's dependent on imagination and consultation and listening again, is increasing Indigenous naming on campus. We've got roads, we've got buildings, we've got rooms, we've got lots of infrastructure, and they deserve to see that start to happen. We've seen a little bit of it happen, but I think I'm just encouraging all of us to consider how that could move ahead more forcefully. Well, I didn't want to go on, but I wanted to offer some of those as tangible insights into what I think we need to do, but also what we have been doing at the university level in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Insightful. With Peter's indulgence, I'm going to just mention two more things. One, he talked about the Indigenous Students' Council. We also, of course, have an Indigenous Graduate Students' Council that's represented here today. So didn't want any of the graduate students to think that we don't think about you and remember you. And the other thing, and of course, Peter, I get the luxury and the privilege to talk to Peter about these things all the time. And so one of the other things I just wanted to mention is that when we signed the memorandum with the FSIN, within maybe an hour of that signing, someone said to me, but you know, what about the Métis people? So for the Métis people in the room, I want you to hear me say that we're very aware of the Métis presence on the campus. We're very aware of the students and the faculty and the staff. And so when it comes to creating things, memorandums, we rely on our colleagues. I rely on Elder Norm Fleury, for example, Caroline Tate, our faculty colleague, people around campus to help us to know when there is a good opportunity. Of course, we have relationships with GDI, and we move with and through GDI as well. But I just wanted to add that. So that people are aware. Our next speaker, I'd like to welcome Paul Sayers. And Paul very graciously agreed to step in for our colleague, Trika McDonald, who's a director in Human Resources. Human Resources, in the last couple of years that I have seen, have come on and have, my Dad used to say, get a glove and get in the game. Human Resources has many gloves. We've got Liz Durrett here today as well, has really come on and joined the university's efforts to make and move this agenda forward. So I'm grateful to Paul. Paul is a recruitment specialist focusing on Indigenous staff and faculty with the University of Saskatchewan. He's Anishinaabe from Garden River First Nation in Northern Ontario and a graduate of the University of Toronto. We still love him, even though he's a graduate of the University of Toronto. With 20 years' experience in human resources, primarily in Toronto, he's dedicated his career to assisting Aboriginal people obtain employment in a variety of organizations, including CIBC, Hydro One, Garden River First Nation, and Miswi Beak Aboriginal Employment and Training. He has led several projects designed to increase the representation of Aboriginal people in all levels of the companies he's worked for. And Paul has led several projects focusing on capacity development with an end goal of creating a representative workforce, which includes Aboriginal people. So Paul is right here on our campus doing this work. Paul will come forward and tell us all the wonderful things that Human Resources has been engaged in. So Paul, I welcome you to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Just going to get this microphone fixed here. Anin Gunkiki Dejnakas Kitaganzibi Dunjaba, Anishinaabe Narawa, Jajek Nadodem. My name is Paul Sayers. I'm Anishinaabe from the Garden River First Nation, which is on Robinson Huron Treaty territory. I'm a direct descendant of two of the signatories of that treaty, which are Shingwak and Nebanego-Ching. So today we're here to talk about some of the Aboriginal initiatives that are going on in human resources, and we couldn't have got anything off the ground without the hiring of certain people within the department, and one of those people were Liz Durrett over here, who was hired as an inclusion and diversity specialist, and I was hired as a recruitment specialist in November 2015. So the focus on our jobs was to build relationships and promote the university as an employer of choice, develop partnerships in the community, and develop programs and initiatives that will increase the Aboriginal candidate pools. Within our HR department, we had a vision, and that vision was to have Aboriginal employees represented at all levels of the organization, including senior administrative positions, faculty, and exempt positions, in all units, including academic and administrative, and in all quadrants, including critical, specialized, core, and flex of the organization. And the strategic focus is focused on 4 areas, including language, preparing the workforce, recruitment, and retention. And I have some personal strategies related to my work, which include capacity building, visibility and sustainability of the current staff and faculty here, program development, outreach, education and awareness, relationship building, that's internal and external. So those 2 pieces are very important to some of the work we're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Aboriginal Career Start in a few moments, but I'm going to focus on some of the other initiatives that we've been focusing on in response to some of the calls to action of the TRC. So we're going to have a big event coming up on Monday, April 24th. We're going to kind of make the official announcement right now. We're bringing Ted Nolan in from the Garden River First Nation. He's an NHL coach. Can't really speak to too much of that right now, but it's going to answer the call with the Sports and Reconciliation, call to action number 90. As well, to answer the call to action 92, Human Resources has been involved with Indigenous voices, and this call to action talks about the importance of providing employees with personal and professional development opportunities on anti-racism, intercultural learning, and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit histories. So this program is a bit about staff and faculty development initiative developed by the Beadwork Committee through the College of Education and the Gwen Moss Center for Teaching Effectiveness. The program focuses on learning and then applying the new knowledge and understanding gained in individuals' professional practice and personal lives. The central program focuses on relevant content, pedagogy, and resources that create a professional learning environment that is participatory and collaborative. Participants have the opportunity to receive a certificate of participation upon completion of attending 20 hours or more of the gatherings. Currently, HR is involved in that phase, as well as protective services, and they're going into phase 2 of that component. Another area that Liz Durrett has been focused on is the Aboriginal Self-ID campaign, which was rolled out through Human Resources this past October. The campaign will help establish a community of Aboriginal employees on campus, showcase pride and celebration of identity. It also provides a network for sourcing applicant pools and identify gaps in quadrants and levels. Up to this point, since October, we have about 206 staff and faculty that have self-ID'd as Aboriginal, and that's approximately 3.4%. So anybody who's Indigenous in the room who hasn't self-declared, please do. You can contact Elizabeth Durrett or you can contact myself and we can link you to the proper way that you can self-identify here on the campus. Another area that Liz Durrett has been working with is the inclusion of diversity language. It's a strategic focus of language to be conscious, intentional, and consistent in the use of this language. HR developed diversity Aboriginal competency language for use in job profiles, and they're embedded diversity language in the university's recruitment website. So for those of you who have been applying to jobs for the last year or so, if you go to the top of any job ad on our site, you'll see that it says the University of Saskatchewan values diversity and Aboriginal engagement is a strategic priority. So that was something that Liz developed in connection with some of the people that we work with in human resources. HR has also developed specific diversity interview questions and education on expected responses and anchors, and they have an introduction to the diversity as part of the new employee orientation. She also ensures diversity language and the needs of marginalized groups are included during current policy review and updating efforts. As well, another focus is the Aboriginal Alumni Association. HR is currently developing an Aboriginal Alumni Association in partnership with Student and Enrollment Services Division and University Relations. The purpose of the Aboriginal Alumni Association is to connect, support, and recruit. The U of S Aboriginal graduates will be encouraged to become an active member of the university's Aboriginal Alumni Association to connect with fellow Aboriginal alumni and receive information concerning events, job opportunities, and other relevant news, and facilitate opportunities for relationship building and knowledge sharing. One of the areas that I particularly focus on is the marketing and promotion of the current staff and faculty at the university. I really believe it's important that the visibility of Aboriginal employees are showcased here on the campus and externally, as well as the sustainability of staff here at the university. When I took a review of the 2016 report on our progress building reconciliation related to the student experience, I noticed a comment that was made that future and current Indigenous students need to be able to see themselves at post-secondary institutions, and this can be achieved through ensuring that there are Indigenous role models and scholars creating spaces for Indigenous students and removing accessibility barriers. And this could be transferable to Indigenous faculty and staff, so that's what I do when I bear some of my recruitment in mind. We're looking at building the Indigenous staff and faculty recruitment brand, promotional material development. We're currently developing an Indigenous recruitment tagline consistent with the university's branding, and we have just accepted an RFP from an external production company to create an Indigenous staff and faculty video, which will be shown on our partner institution websites, including our HR websites, as well as possibly showing the commercials in markets with substantial Aboriginal populations, all designed to increase Aboriginal representation here on campus. I also want to talk a little about the University Library Aboriginal Internship. It's to support the university's strategic directions. The University Library, in its strategic plan, has identified several strategies to engage with and support the Aboriginal community, one of which is centered on growing the pool of Aboriginal people qualified as information knowledge managers in this province. They're envisioned to provide a unique educational and experiential opportunity for an Aboriginal person in the field of knowledge management, broadly understanding the processes of strategically and critically defining, protecting, classifying and disseminating information within an organization to facilitate a richer understanding and decision-making. And an Aboriginal University graduate will have the opportunity to work at and learn about the complexities of an academic library while pursuing a fully funded master's degree in library and information. And the next piece I wanted to talk about is our Aboriginal Career Start program. The Aboriginal Career Start program answers 3 calls to action through truth and reconciliation, education, 7th bullet. We call upon the federal government to develop with Aboriginal groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational and employment gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians, as well as the point 10 of education to improve education levels and success rates, as well as business and reconciliation, number 92, to ensure that Aboriginal people have equitable access to jobs, training, and educational opportunities, and that Aboriginal communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from economic development projects. Now, over the last couple of weeks, our AVP Cheryl Carver requested that Zahid Barde, who's our communications specialist in human resources, and myself create a promotional video on the Aboriginal Career Start program. As we are storytellers, it's going to tell you a story about the Aboriginal Career Start program. Don't mind the homely face that kind of kicks the video off. So Jordan, if we want to. The Aboriginal Career Start is a 2-week training program developed internally at the University of Saskatchewan between human resources and financial services. We have also built external partnerships between the Saskatoon Tribal Council, the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies, and the Gabriel Dumont Institute. The Aboriginal Career Start is a 2-week training program where graduates of the 3 partner institutions learn various job skills to be successful in office administrative or financial administration roles. Here is a snapshot of the current participants of the first cohort of the Aboriginal Career Start program.
My favorite part of the program was the foundation that the committee gave to us in starting these career paths at the University of Saskatchewan. With all the participants and also the committee members, it allowed us to build a community within a community, and that's what I really like about the program.
What I liked the best about the program was being able to meet all of the speakers that were presenting at the program and being able to meet all the other Aboriginal Career Start cohorts.
My favorite part about the 2-week training program was getting to know all of the students and just creating those friendships.
One thing that sticks out is the fact that I was offered a permanent role after my initial placement with the ACS, so that's one thing I like best about the Aboriginal Career Start program.
What I enjoyed the best about the Aboriginal Career Start program was how informal it was and how you got to meet people on campus without feeling too much pressure.
My favorite thing about the Aboriginal Career Start program was getting an opportunity to work somewhere on campus and get the experience I needed to move forward with my career.
I am so proud to be a graduate of this program. I can show other people coming into this program what you can expect, how you can grow. As a mom coming into this after 25 years of not being in school and never thinking I would have a chance to work at the university.
I get to wake up every day and know that I am a part of the University of Saskatchewan community, as well as knowing that I have been a part of the very first ever Aboriginal Career Start.
I've learned a lot of things at the Aboriginal Career Start program that I took with me to my current job, and it will definitely help me in the future.
I love working here. It's a great place to come and work. I love waking up every day to come to my position.
How I feel about working at the University of Saskatchewan is amazing. It's one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life. And like I said, I really have the Aboriginal Career Start program to thank.
As an Aboriginal, my experience on campus has been very positive. I have no regrets coming to the university. It's been nothing but beneficial for me and my family.
It feels great to be working at the University of Saskatchewan. I love my job and I love my coworkers, and I just love every part of it.
The quality of life for me and my family has changed immensely. It has helped financially, emotionally. I feel like I can show my kids that they can do anything now. This has proven that, you know, I'm not just someone sitting in a back room on a telephone. I'm a part of a whole bigger picture.
I feel proud to be here. I come to work every day and I'm happy. I'm happy to be a part of the University of Saskatchewan.
I am proud to be a graduate of the Aboriginal Career Start program. I want to show other Aboriginal people that they can succeed in their future with any career that they choose.
Starting this program with a group of people has helped me a lot along the way. It's given me confidence. I see people that I know. You're not by yourself ever. You see friendly faces all the time. I've actually got a job that I get to work with two of the people that I started with, and it's great. I see someone that is like family to me every day, and I couldn't be happier.
I have an opportunity to speak to others about such a great program. I've had the honor of speaking to Saskatoon Tribal Council about the program.
Advice I would give to someone who's thinking about taking the Aboriginal Career Start program would be, I guess, to do it. It's a really great program and you get to meet a lot of people, and it opens new doors for you.
Just go for it. Just try it. There's nothing that'll be holding you back. You can gain nothing but good experiences from this program.
You know, I have more opportunities for myself financially as well as my family.
It has been very rewarding to be part of the Aboriginal Career Start program because I tell my family and friends how awesome it is to work at the university, and I plan on retiring at the university.
The Aboriginal Career Start program is an amazing program, and it has opened so many doors for me. It has made me feel confident, financially stable, and I have the Career Start cohort members that I can rely on.
It's beyond what you can imagine a career could be, and that boost they gave us to start here is amazing. I can't talk enough and praise everyone who has worked to get this program started. I can't praise you enough.
So I really hope you enjoyed that story that we're telling about the Aboriginal Career Start program. I just have 3 things to say before I conclude my remarks. April 5th, for those of you who haven't signed up for the launch for Cohort 2, please do so. Send an RSVP to me. We're currently in the recruitment stage for the Cohort 2, which will be officially launched on April 5th, and then the course will start on June 1st. Second piece, I'm also looking for volunteers to work with us for the graduation powwow on May 31st. I'm the lead on that, so anybody that wants to speak to me about that. And thirdly, for those of you as a captive audience, we are looking for placements for the Aboriginal Career Start next cohort, so maybe you can contact like Tracy Thornton. Tracy, can you please stand over there? Tracy's the lead on our internal placement committee, and we also have Liz Durrett if you want to stand for a second. We have a great team in human resources. Without the leadership of people like Cheryl Carver, Trika McDonald, Liz Durrett, a lot of these initiatives wouldn't been able to have happened. So it's really nice and refreshing to work in a department and not be the only Aboriginal person on the department or on the floor or even in the company. So the University of Saskatchewan, I'm a proud employee of this university, and I want to continue to see it grow. Thank you very much. Miigwech.
Thank you, Paul. Amazing things. I think we have, we're heading up to lunch. We're a little bit behind, but I don't want to deny anyone questions. So if there's any questions that people want to bring to the mic, to our panelists, thank you so much to our panelists. Wonderful information sharing. Ziad, please.
Okay, Ziad Gaith, GSA President. So when I was looking at the today's agenda yesterday, and I saw the title of this session, Structuring the University. The first thing came to my mind that structuring any academic institution for the path to reconciliation require including Indigenous students and Indigenous community in the important decision-making bodies in the university. And when we think about the important decision-making, we think about the strategic decision-making body, and I mean the Board of Governance. So my question to the panelists, or to the university in general, does the university plan to work with the provincial government to include the Indigenous students on the Board of Governance and including also the Indigenous community on the board? And I believe as a student leader that such inclusion will have a very positive consequences on reconciliation our university. Thank you.
Is this on? Yeah. So thanks for that question. It's not unfamiliar to me. The matrix, for the Board of Governors does include Indigenous representation, and that's something that, of course, is really important. Beyond that, when you look at all kinds of representation on the Board of Governors, it involves changing the University Act within the province's legislation. So that's something, yes, we have talked with the government, and we have ongoing discussions with the government about what that board complement should look like.
Great, thank you. Rob.
Great, thanks very much, and what an inspiring day to be part of the University of Saskatchewan. I want to applaud everyone who's made this a reality and a continuing conversation. It's actually on the same theme, but it potentially is perhaps a little bit more broad. We have a really powerful document, and it's the University of Saskatchewan Act. And if we look at the primary role of the University of Saskatchewan, I just wonder if there's an opportunity for us to take some of the great inspiration that has been shared so far today and begin to think about maybe enriching the primary role of the University of Saskatchewan right within that act. And that may include mention of governance, but it may more broadly offer an aspirational component that would send a broad message, not simply across the province, but frankly across the country and well beyond, that some of the foundations also reflect the inclusive nature of the conversation that we're having today. So I offer that. It's exactly in the same spirit. Perhaps there's room for us to continue that dialogue.
So I agree with the applause. It's a great point, and maybe the only thing I could add to that is you get another example of why it is important to have that vision document, because we can summon that, on behalf of the whole university when entering into those kinds of discussions about altering the act to reflect it better. Thanks, Rob.
Maybe we'll go with Laura Dannon for the last question for this session.
So last session we talked a little bit about the importance of land for Indigenous peoples. And I think that the health of the environment is really tied to our connection to land. And that I wanted to ask what initiatives or what structures are in place at the University of Saskatchewan to protect the environment as a large institution. One really simple example that comes to mind is composting on campus, which I know we don't have. So are there processes in place? What are the structures to help us keep our environment safe and clean and usable for Indigenous peoples in Saskatchewan?
Thank you for that question. There's a long answer to it, but to try to make it brief, because it is very important. We have on campus the Office of Sustainability, have had that for several years. It's a very active office. It works in concert with the USSU and with graduate students, and also in concert with our School for Environment and Sustainability. And a lot has been achieved through that office, including, as some of you know, our improvement in the STARS rankings to a silver. Most recently, 3 years before we thought we'd get there. But back to your question. I did say at the General Academic Assembly almost a year ago now that I was really encouraging the university to concentrate on 3 principles. One was connectivity, so connecting out beyond the university and connecting up within the university in a very interdisciplinary way. A second was diversity, and we're talking about a lot of that here today, but there's a lot more to talk about in that regard, of course. And the third was sustainability. And so it was my hope that by drawing attention to that, and also by putting some concrete resources behind it, that we would see a lot of things happen. And I think we are. So maybe on that level of governance and so on, that's what I would say at the moment in answer to your question. Maybe the last thing is that as we work as a university through what that 4th integrated plan will look like that Lee was mentioning, we are clarifying that those 3, diversity, connectivity, and sustainability, and probably a 4th, creativity, but I don't want to speak for all the people who are thinking this through, but sustainability definitely, will collectively create the kind of prism through which we look at the next several years of the university.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Just to pick up on Ziad's question, thank you, by the way, for those wonderful questions. The GSA has made the move to have a position on their executive that is for an Indigenous student. And so I want to be a little bit provocative and call out to my USSU colleagues. I can't see any of them here, and they're probably glad of that because they would be averting their gaze. I want to do a call out to my USSU colleagues, who you've heard a couple times this morning. We actually had 4 years, 3 individuals, but 4 years of an Indigenous USSU president. And while that ebbs and flows, I want my USSU colleagues and the undergraduate students in the University of Saskatchewan to be thinking about whether it's time to have an executive position that's dedicated to the Indigenous portfolio amongst our undergraduate student government. So I'll throw that out there. Thank you. It's the power of the mic, right? Her head is swelling. So thank you for that great session. We're going to break for lunch. What we did today was to provide boxed lunches. And the reason that we did that, and by the way, there are gluten-free lunches and vegetarian lunches. They're all marked. The reason that we did that is because we really want to invite you to take your lunch and find your way to the North Concourse. So that everyone always says, what is the North Concourse? So in Place Riel, as you come off of where you get off the bus, there's that large area in the expansion and development of Place Riel, and it is full of over 60 posters that our colleagues, faculty, staff, students from around the campus have developed for today's event. So they are posters on research, they are posters on initiatives, they are posters on services, and so it's really an opportunity to get a snapshot. There are posters on some of the things you heard about today, and there are posters on things you haven't heard about. So we invite you to take your lunch and find your way to the North Concourse. We're going to start promptly at 1 o'clock. Our first speaker up, Dr. Sheila Mclean, is going to be talking about her research in anti-racism and her action. If you have ever heard Sheila Mclean speak, you will not want to miss this. This is going to be very powerful. So I invite you back at 1 p.m. and we'll get started again. Thank you so much.